Welcome to Trial by Wine. We take a closer look at crimes that highlight how fascinating humans can be. Schmitty, Swanee and Clarky visit crimes and run them through their jury of three, debating both sides of the case to agree an appropriate, if totally fictitious, sentence. Please be advised, Trial by Wine may include explicit or disturbing content and will include drunken rambling. Listener discretion is advised. All right, how are we?
Very well.
Good.
Yes.
Have we got any news?
None from us.
No.
Okay.
No.
Well, perhaps we should introduce ourselves. I'm Schmitty.
I'm Swanee.
And I'm Clarky. And together we are
Trial by
Wine.
Wine.
And what are we drinking?
Oh, I've gone and splashed out on a
Ooh,
bottle of
Schweppes.
soda water.
Yeah.
Schweppes. I've got the top shelf Schweppes.
We're still having the bone dry rose.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Is it bone dry?
I think it probably is. There's not much in the way of sweetness in it. So, yeah, I'm going to say yes. But deliciously bone dry.
Yeah. I'm still drinking the Heathcote Wineries Shiraz, HQ Shiraz, from my Trial by Wine glass.
Mm.
Vessel.
I saw that. Very nice.
Same glass, or are you on a new one?
Same glass.
Well done.
All right, who's got a story for us?
I do.
What are you
Do you
going
want
to tell
to
us
hear
about?
it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, before I get too involved, I'll tell you a little bit
Sources.
first. So I'm going to tell you about one of Australia's longest running unsolved mysteries. It's a story that I knew of, and I think that most people our age will have heard of it, but I didn't know a lot about it. So I thought I'd look into it. And this year, 59 years after it happened, it's back in the news again. But more of that later. Firstly, I'll tell you my sources. Wikipedia, Mamma Mia, news.com.au, all that's interesting, and the ABC. So this is the story of the Beaumont children. I think, as I said, most people our age will know it. They might have heard of it, may not know who they were or why their names are so widely recognised. So I thought I would do my best to tell you that story.
Please do.
So
I don't know it, actually.
Yeah, it's interesting because the phrase "the Beaumont children"
That
is like a household name, isn't it? Like it's yeah. So
to be fair,
maybe I
I'd
can
never
teach you
heard
something.
of it. I had never heard of it until we were doing this podcast, and I've looked at it once or twice in connection to other things. Not in its own right, but other things have come up, and I've thought, oh, that's interesting. So tell me more. Tell me more.
Well, first up, we're going to have to go and jump into the timey-wimey machine because we haven't used that to time travel a lot lately. And we're going back to Adelaide in 1966. I feel like we've done a few of these, but this one, it's Australia Day, so our national public holiday, 26th of January. And as is often the case around this time, Adelaide is undergoing a heat wave. Yep, it's hot. And we know Adelaide gets stinking hot, hottest temperature on Earth kind of day. Well, South Australia does. Adelaide gets pretty close to that. So Jane, who's 9, Arnna, who's 7, and Grant, who's 4, Beaumont, ask their mum Nancy if they can go to the beach, Glenelg Beach specifically. They'd been there the day before when their dad, Grant, who's nicknamed Jim. So when you hear the name Jim, think Grant. And if you hear the name Grant, think Jim. Or just think Dad if you hear either of those.
Grant's mowing. Yep.
Luckily, there's only one Grant and one Jim. Yes, Grant's mowing, exactly. Luckily, there's only one of them, so it's not going to get confusing. So, yeah, he dropped them there the day before, and they'd spent the day at Glenelg Beach. So, quite common. Whilst he went off to work in Snowtown. And yes, it's the same Snowtown that is also a household name in Australia, but that's not part of this tale, so maybe we'll tell you about that later. So Nancy allows the children to go to the beach alone as long as they stay together. Jane knows the bus routes, and it's only a 5-minute bus ride from their Somerton Park home to Glenelg Beach. Now, before you get sort of, well, you probably won't, but some people might be getting a little bit, what the hell? She let the kids get on the bus to go to the beach? It's 1960s Adelaide, which is a young, free and innocent place to live where parents often let their children roam free in public spaces, particularly at the beach where there's plenty of people who could watch out for unaccompanied children. Because remember back in the day, people watched out for unaccompanied children It took a village to raise a child, all those sorts of things. Not everyone's just scared of everyone. Funnily enough, this is possibly one of the reasons everyone is scared of everyone. What transpires that day is often looked back on as the day that Adelaide lost its innocence.
Oh.
So the three children board the bus at 8:45 a.m. and they were expected to catch the noon bus home. However, 12 p.m. rolls by and the children are not at home. Nancy was a little concerned but assumed they'd missed the bus and they'd catch the next one at 2 p.m. However, when they didn't arrive home after 2 p.m, obviously she began to worry.
Yeah.
Then Jim arrived home at 3 p.m. and they still weren't home. So they knew something was wrong and reported all three children missing. Of course, 1960s Adelaide, police initially thought the three children had lost track of time and would be home later. And, we've all had that thing when you're a kid growing up, you're home before the lights go off or whatever, and you get home an hour later. It's kind of common, I think, back then to be on kid time. Sure, you get an ass whooping when you get home, but it happens.
But it was worth it.
Right. However, this view quickly changed when they were searching sand dunes, nearby buildings, and then airports, rail lines and interstate roads were being monitored as fears grew of a kidnapping. Within 24 hours, the case was being reported Australia-wide. Now, if you think about a report going Australia-wide today, you just whack it on the news and away it goes. Back then, Australia had lots of local newspapers that weren't interconnected and certainly not national. So you can imagine for it to be making nationwide news, it's a big story. On the 29th of January, just 3 days after the disappearance, the Adelaide Sunday Mail's lead story was "Sex Crime Now Feared," because there was a growing belief that the children were victims of abduction and murder by a sex offender.
Pervert.
Yes, pervert.
When you call it something like that in those days, like the language was a bit different.
I think you're right. Although "Sex Crime Now Feared," I feel like that would be
that's true.
That'd be an SVU headline.
It would be.
Liv would be all over
Pedo.
that. Pedo. Oh,
Pedo.
That reminds me of that Ricky Gervais show.
Oh, I know.
Still makes me laugh. I nearly wet myself when I first saw it.
I was talking about that the other day with somebody. It makes me laugh. And he's like, pedo. Yeah. He goes, don't worry about you, little ginger.
Yeah. Even if I was a pedo, I wouldn't go for you, you fat ginger. Or whatever it is. Yeah.
I just like the way the kid's going, pedo.
And he's not having a bar of it. He's not shamed. He just doubles down and bang.
Yeah.
Right. So, also on the 29th of January, the Patawalonga boat haven was drained after a woman told police that she'd seen the children there around 7 p.m. on the day of their disappearance. Despite the best efforts of police and emergency operations, nothing was found. So the police are talking to people and they find several people who'd seen the children that day. The children had been seen in the company of a tall blonde man in his mid-30s at Collie Reserve. Stu, I don't know if you remember when we stayed in Glenelg, when I was there for work pre-COVID. We stayed at the Oaks Apartments. So there's two lots of Oaks Apartments on Glenelg Beach. There's the ones right on the beach. There's a reserve and then there's the Oaks Apartments. And Collie Reserve is the one in between. It's directly across the road. Big, lovely ovals, big pines. I think maybe Norfolk pines. Just kind of a typical Australian park where you see some of those really big pines. And it's as I said, directly behind the beach. So the man they were seen with was described as tanned, thin to athletic build and wearing swim trunks. The children appeared to be relaxed and were enjoying playing with him. The man approached one of the witnesses, asking if they'd seen anyone near the children's belongings as their money was missing. The man then went off to change whilst the children waited for him. Then they all left together, walking away from the beach. Police estimate this was around 12:15 p.m. Around noon, the children visited Wenzel's Bakery, which was not far from where they were and was typically where they bought their lunch after the beach. The bakery staff knew the kids and they recalled Jane, the eldest, purchasing pasties for herself and her siblings, as well as a meat pie with a £1 note. So this was unusual because Nancy hadn't given Jane a £1 note. She'd handed her daughter 6 shillings that morning, enough for the children's bus rides and their lunch. So £1
I presume
note.
a pound's a lot more, is it?
Yeah.
Because I was going to make the comment to say, God, if you'd bought all that stuff, it'd cost you about $30. Right.
At least.
But at the same time, I was thinking that's quite a lot to buy.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And so I think...
For a 4, 7 and 9-year-old.
Well, yeah, correct. Also, what the shopkeeper had said was that the children had been there plenty of times, often bought pasties, had never ordered a pie before. So police believe that the £1 note was given to the children to buy lunch by the blonde man from Collier Reserve, and that the pie was for him to eat. And the £1 note, we'll touch on that a bit later. So about 2.5 hours later, another witness said she saw the children still with the man who was carrying an airline bag similar to the one that Jane had, which I guess makes sense if she's got a bag and he's carrying it.
Oh, I see.
The Beaumont children were described as shy, and their parents believed it was out of character for them to be so confidently with a stranger, which led the investigators to theorise that the children had most likely met the man on previous visits to the beach, and they'd grown to trust him. That's just creepy, isn't it?
Yeah. It's grooming. Don't we call it grooming now?
Yeah.
Can't go back and look at footage.
Yeah, exactly right. But that is supported by what at the time seemed like a throwaway line from Arnna, the middle child, stating that Jane had got a boyfriend down the beach. At the time, Nancy thought it was a playmate and thought nothing of it until after the disappearance. Imagine that realisation that something like that had been said. I mean, back then you wouldn't think anything of it, but poor mum having to connect those dots, I guess.
Small daughter said, her older sister has a boyfriend, you wouldn't assume it was a 30-year-old.
Pedo. Correct.
No.
So on that first night of their disappearance, Jim rode around in a patrol car with the police searching for his children. And when they dropped him off, he got into his own car and continued searching. Despite the continued investigations by police and Jim and Nancy never giving up hope and leaving no stone unturned in their search, the children were never found, nor were their clothes or bags. In the 1970s, Nancy and Jim separated, and presumably because the pressure of losing their children was too much for their marriage to endure.
I bet.
Which would,
That's horrendous. Oh, God.
Yeah, it is. It really is. They just kind of vanished into thin air. So, as with many investigations, there's many sightings that can help or hinder an investigation. And I'll talk to you about some of those. So, according to an initial statement from a postman who knew the children well, the children were seen walking alone away from the beach along Jetty Road at 2:55 p.m. in the general direction of their home. He said they were holding hands and laughing in the main street. Police could not work out why the reliable children who were running late were strolling alone and appeared unconcerned. The man contacted police 2 days later and said that he had seen them in the morning, not the afternoon as previously stated. I mean, possibly easy to do, but would be frustrating for the police. Several months later, a woman reported that on the night of the disappearance, a man accompanied by 2 girls and a boy entered a neighbouring house that she had believed empty. Later, the woman said she had seen the boy walking alone along a lane where he was pursued and roughly caught by the man. The next morning, the house appeared to be deserted again, and she neither saw the man nor the children again. Police could not establish why she'd failed to provide this information earlier, and other reported sightings of the children continued for about a year after their disappearance. Then there's the psychic. So the Beaumont case was not only national news, it attracted international attention. And on the 8th of November 1966, Gerard Croiset, maybe? Croiset? Croiset?
Maybe.
Croiset? A Dutch parapsychologist, psychometrist and psychic, it's a lot, was brought to Australia to assist in the search, which caused a furor in the press, as not everyone was convinced this was a credible use of resources. He was often asked to help police detectives trace missing persons, though authenticated successes were few, and compared against other failures, his success rate was ruled no better than chance.
It's not the greatest review.
No,
It's not a glowing review.
No, I'm not
It's not
a
any
big
better than
believer in
Chance.
psychics, but he's not doing them their cause any favours.
He's not a very good one.
Unsurprisingly, his efforts proved unsuccessful, with his story changing day to day and offering no clues. He identified a spot at a warehouse near the children's home in which he believed their bodies had been buried inside the remains of an old brick kiln. The property owners, who were reluctant to excavate based on a psychic's claim, soon bowed to public pressure after publicity helped raise 40,000 Australian dollars to have the building demolished.
Ooh.
No remains nor any evidence tied to any members of the Beaumont family was found. In 1996, the building identified by Crozet was undergoing partial demolition, and the owners allowed for a full search of the site. Once again, no trace was found of the children. Thanks, Jared. Imagine being those poor people who lived there. Old mate comes out from the Netherlands and says, they're buried
all right,
here.
I'll be going home now. Sorry about that. Never mind.
God, it's a lot to have to endure. Then there's the hoax letters. So about 2 years after their disappearance, the Beaumont parents received 2 letters. One was supposedly written by Jane and another by a man who said he was keeping the children. The envelope showed the postmark of Dandenong in Victoria. The brief notes described a relatively pleasant existence and referred to the man who was keeping them. Police believed at the time that the letters could quite likely have been authentic after comparing them to others written by Jane. The letter from the man said that he had appointed himself guardian of the children and was willing to hand them back to their parents.
What?
In a letter, a meeting place was nominated.
Ooh.
The Beaumont parents, followed by a detective, drove to the designated place, but nobody appeared. Sometime later, a 3rd letter arrived, also purported to be from Jane, stating that the man had realised a disguised detective was present and that he had decided to keep the children because the Beaumonts had betrayed his trust. That would be a lot to have to endure, wouldn't it?
Shocking.
There were no further letters. Then in 1992, so this happened in 1966, so what's that, 26 years later, new forensic examinations of the letters showed that they were a hoax. Fingerprint technology had improved and the author was identified.
Time-wasting assholes. I mean, come on.
And
it's so
imagine
cruel.
the trauma on the parents.
It's so cruel.
My God. So fingerprint technology had improved and the author was identified as a 41-year-old man who had been a teenager at the time and had written the letters as a joke. Because of the time that had elapsed, he was not charged with any offence. Cracking joke, idiot. Okay, imagine I'll do a joke with this and I'll put the parents through that. What a
It's
little
disgusting.
fuck.
Yeah.
And then there's the possible suspects. And let me tell you, there is no shortage of possible suspects. And possibly because, myth becomes legend, blah, blah, blah. Or legend becomes myth, I don't know. But obviously over time, they keep searching very hard and they keep, I guess, trying to go down new avenues to find out what's gone on. Anyway, firstly, let's look at Bevan Spencer von Einem, clearly of German heritage or some such thing, which is not uncommon in Adelaide. So he was born in 1946 and was sentenced to life imprisonment in 1984 for murdering Richard Kelvin, the teenage son of Adelaide newsreader Rob Kelvin. Police and prosecutors publicly stated they believed von Einem had accomplices and was possibly involved in additional murders. About this time, police came to suspect his involvement in the Beaumont disappearance as well. No accomplices were ever charged. Von Einem has refused to cooperate with the investigators about his possible connection with other murders. During the investigation into von Einem, police heard from an informant identified only as Mr. B. He related an alleged conversation in which von Einem boasted of having taken 3 children from a beach several years earlier, and he said he'd taken them home to conduct experiments. According to Mr. B's account, von Einem claimed to have performed brilliant surgery on each of the children and had connected them up. His surgery wasn't so brilliant because apparently one of the children had died during the procedure, and so he had killed the other 2 and dumped the bodies in bushland south of Adelaide. Police had not previously considered von Einem in connection with the Beaumont case, but he resembled descriptions and identikits of the unidentified suspect from 1966, the tall, thin, tanned, Speedo-wearing man. Mr. B also claimed that von Einem had implicated himself in the Adelaide Oval abductions from 1973. I don't know a lot about those, so I can't give you any further info. However, don't be surprised if it pops up in a later Trial by Wine episode.
I imagine that it'd be, I don't know. I guess what people look like in Australia was slightly different than what it does now. It's probably far more multicultural. But like a tall, slim, fair to light brown hair, thin face, suntan complexion, mid-30s, that would probably be quite a lot of people. But what's his name? Van Ryan?
Von Einem.
Von Einem. Is that what he looked like?
Yes. Absolutely, yeah. But as we go through the suspects, you'll see it seems to be fairly common. I mean, surely anyone who wasn't tall and thin at the time would have been ruled out. But yeah, I can imagine if you were investigating this either at the time or as a cold case, the people you would have to be investigating and interviewing, it must just be awful for the police.
Yeah, you're right.
Anyway, what I can tell you is that, like with the Beaumont case, von Einem matches descriptions of the main suspect in the Oval case.
Oh, fucking Adelaide, mate. You wouldn't want to live there. That's all I'm going to say. Never move to Adelaide.
What you'll be surprised about is how many of these suspects have got similar priors. It's not okay.
Do not live in Adelaide.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
City of churches and fucking crazy serial killer pedophile lunatics.
Jesus.
So according to Adelaide Police Detective Bob O'Brien, Mr. B had given important information during the investigation into the Kelvin murder and was regarded as a generally reliable source. So that's the bit about him. However, police reception of the alleged confession was mixed. There were enough plausible details to warrant further research, yet other details relayed by Mr. B did not fit with known facts about the Beaumont case and were regarded with scepticism. As of 2014, von Einem had not been ruled out as a suspect. Mr. B's reference to alleged surgical experimentation corresponded to the coroner's reports on several of the von Einem alleged murder victims. However, while von Einem was known to have frequented Glenelg Beach to perv on the changing rooms, pervs, there's a word.
There it is. It is there, pervert.
Right. Yeah, was described as preoccupied with children. He was younger than the unidentified suspect, whom was reported in his mid-30s. So at the time, von Einem was in his early 20s. And the Beaumont children were also much younger than Richard Kelvin or the other young men von Einem is believed to have targeted, who were in their teens or 20s. So then there's Arthur Stanley Brown. So Arthur Stanley Brown, 1912 to 2002, was charged in 1998 with the murders of sisters Judith and Susan Mackay in Townsville in Queensland. So a long way away. Yeah. They had disappeared on their way to school on the 26th of August 1970 and were found strangled several days later in a dry creek bed. Brown's trial, scheduled for July 2000, was delayed after his lawyer applied for a Section 613 verdict, saying that he's unfit to be tried. He was never retried as he was found to have dementia and Alzheimer's disease, and he died in 2002. Mm-hmm. Similar to von Einem, Brown bore a striking similarity to descriptions and identikits of the suspect for both the Beaumont and Oval cases, tall and thin. A search for a connection to the Beaumont children was unsuccessful and no employment records existed that could shed light on Brown's movements at the time. Some of the records were believed to be lost in the 1974 Brisbane flood. It is possible that Brown, who had unrestricted access to government buildings, may have destroyed his own files. Sounds like a stretch, but possible. Although there is no proof that he ever visited Adelaide, a witness recalled having a conversation with Brown in which he mentioned having seen the Adelaide Festival Centre nearing completion, which would have placed him in the city shortly before the Oval abduction in 25th of August 1973. However, no evidence had been found to connect Brown with Adelaide in 1966. He was 53 at the time of the disappearance, so unlikely that he was the one. James Ryan O'Neill, born in 1947, who was sentenced to life imprisonment for the 1975 murder of a 9-year-old boy in Tasmania, is reported to have previously told several acquaintances that he was responsible for the Beaumont disappearance. I mean, it must just be horrendous being police going through and talking to these people who have apparently said that they did this shit.
I'll get you. Oh, I did that. I mean,
oh no, what the fuck?
Oh, okay. Okay.
You should almost be made guilty just for saying that.
Well, you're wasting police time anyway. Absolutely,
No,
you should just get punished
confessing to be an absolute fuck.
It's just time wasting and attention seeking.
In 2006, O'Neill lost an injunction in the High Court of Australia to stop the broadcast of an ABC documentary, The Fisherman, which attempted to link him to the case. Former Victorian detective Gordon Davies spent 3 years speaking to O'Neill to win his confidence before filming him for The Fisherman. Davies said that although there was no evidence to link O'Neill to the Beaumont case, he was persuaded that O'Neill was to blame. I asked him about the Beaumonts and he said, I couldn't have done it. I was in Melbourne at the time. That is not a denial. That's Gordon Davies' words. Later asked if he had murdered the children, O'Neill replied, look, on legal advice, I'm not going to say where I was or when I was there. Asshole. Although O'Neill claims never to have visited Adelaide, his work in the opal industry at the time required that he frequently visit Coober Pedy, which would have required him to pass through the city. For anyone who doesn't know, you go from Melbourne
In
to
those
Adelaide
days, you
and
would
then
have
up to
driven
Coober
up to
Pedy.
Coober Pedy, yeah?
Yeah, but probably by bus or something, so you'd go that way and up, I reckon.
Yeah.
Davey also suspected O'Neill was involved in the Oval case. The South Australian police have never interviewed O'Neill and discounted him as a suspect in the Beaumont case. Then there's Derek Ernest Percy. Derek Percy, 1948 to 2013, a convicted child murderer and Victoria's then longest-serving prisoner, was suggested in a 2007 article in Melbourne's Age as a suspect in the Beaumont case. The Age alleged that the evidence gathered by cold case investigators pointed to Percy in a number of unsolved child murders, including the Beaumonts. His insanity plea in the 1969 murder of Yvonne Toohey was at least partly based on his suffering a psychological condition that could prevent him remembering details of his actions. Percy
That's
was supposed to
convenient.
have... Oh no, right? Percy was supposed to have indicated that he believed he might have killed the Beaumont children, as he was in the area at the time, but that he had no recollection of actually doing so. On the 30th of August 2007, Victoria Police successfully applied for permission to question Percy in relation to the Beaumont case. In 1966, Percy was aged 17 and therefore seems too young to be an unidentified suspect seen with the children. It's also unknown whether Percy would have had access to a car at the time, and it's presumed that the suspect needed a car to get away quickly and for disposing of the bodies. Percy was imprisoned from 1969 until his death in 2013, which means he couldn't have done the Adelaide Oval abductions. Then there's Alan Anthony Munro, who then goes on to be referred to as Alan Maxwell McIntyre. I don't know why I've done
What?
that. I know, right?
He changed his name?
Died in 2017, and he'd been investigated by police and cleared of involvement in the Beaumont case. He gave a second-hand account to the Adelaide Advertiser that a man he'd known in 1966. So Alan Maxwell McIntyre gave evidence about Anthony Alan Munro, who was being sought in Southeast Asia in connection with child abuse incidents there. And he's saying that he'd come home with the children's bodies in the boot of his car. McIntyre's children said that they and their father initially mistook Arnna's body for that of a boy because of her short haircut. The man in question was later identified as businessman Alan Anthony Munro, aged 75 in 2017, so that 25 or so back then. A former scoutmaster, shocked, who had pleaded guilty to 10 child sex offences dating back to 1962. For these crimes, Munro was sentenced to 10 years in prison with a non-parole period of 5 years and 5 months, making him eligible for release in 2022. In June 2017, Adelaide police detectives were given a copy of a child's diary written in 1966, which allegedly placed Munro in the vicinity of Glenelg Beach at the time of the Beaumont disappearance. He was convicted of abusing several children, including one of McIntyre's sons, who was a contributor to the diary. Munro had been previously investigated by the police, but no evidence has been found that he was involved in the Beaumont case.
This is just a roll call of the
Yeah.
lowest of the low, isn't it?
Like that's
Jesus.
you imagine how skewed your view would get of dealing with one of those types after another.
Yeah.
Ugh. And then there's Harry Phipps. So you'll be pleased to know Harry Phipps is the last of the suspects. So
Roll call.
the roll call is nearly at an end, Swanee. He died in 2004. Now, Harry Phipps was a local factory owner and then member of Adelaide's social elite. And he came to the attention as a possible suspect after the publication of the book The Satin Man, Uncovering the Mystery of the Missing Beaumont Children. So that came to be in 2013. The book did not name... I know, gross. The book did not name the identity of the Satin Man, but Phipps's estranged son, Hayden, named him soon after the book's publication.
Oh.
Jeepers, cop that. Phipps bore a substantial likeness to the identity of the man seen talking to the Beaumont children at Glenelg Beach. He was wealthy and was known to be in the habit of giving out £1 notes, and was later alleged to have been a pedophile and lived only 300 metres away from the beach on the corner of Augusta Street and Sussex Street. Hayden, who was aged 15 at the time of the disappearance, came forward to researchers in 2007 with the claim that he had seen the children in his father's yard on the 26th of January. Two other people who were youths at the time said they had been paid by Phipps to dig a 2 by 1 by 2 metre hole in his factory yard that weekend for unstated reasons. In November 2013, a 1 metre squared section of a factory in North Plympton, which had been owned by Phipps, was excavated. The ground-penetrating radar found one small anomaly which can indicate movement or objects within the soil, but the dig found no additional evidence and investigations into the site were closed. Then, on the 22nd of January 2018, Adelaide detectives announced that they would return to the factory site and conduct further excavations after a private investigation sponsored by Channel 7 in Adelaide. The excavation on the 2nd of February 2018 took 9 hours. Animal bones and general rubbish were found, but nothing related to the Beaumont case. Then, on Monday, the 10th of February 2025, 9 days ago, and 5 days before I researched this story, the ABC reported that a third excavation will take place at the site on the 22nd of February, so in 3 days' time. The building has been demolished and the land will be sold off, so this will be the last opportunity to excavate. And the reason they are going to go back, apart from that, is that it's thought that the land has had 1 to 2 metres of clean fill placed on top of it since the time the Beaumont children went missing.
Yeah.
Which means that the previous excavations, which hadn't taken that into account, would not have been deep enough.
They should have done archaeology. Correct. Just 1 year of archaeology at university 30 years ago. That'll tell you that.
Well, they found photos, I think, sometime afterwards, which were back from 1966 or thereabouts, which showed the difference in the height.
In the height, yeah.
Which is why they went, that's what's happened. So they're going to go much deeper this time. So there's no categorical evidence that Phipps murdered the Beaumont children, nor that the remains are at the Castorloy factory site, but there is enough to suggest that one last excavation is worthwhile. Heartbreakingly, both Nancy and Jim passed away without knowing what happened to their children, Nancy in 2019 and Jim in 2023.
Jeepers.
And that is the story of the Beaumont children.
Oh,
wow.
sad.
Now you know.
Now I know. In my mind, I'm sort of, there's two parts to that story. There's the part of the actual crime and the children being taken, and then that literal catalogue of
deviants.
Really, people,
Herbs.
well, they've murdered that one. We know of this. We don't know of that. They've been here. They've, had sex offences against them. They've got an interest in children. It's like, bloody hell.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes it's a convenient thing for me to forget, but I forget that there are people who are doing this stuff.
Oh, you just block it out, don't you?
Yeah, because I think so much of it's online. Yeah. This is old school.
Oh, yeah.
Hanging around.
South Australia, Adelaide definitely over-indexes, though.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, there's always that thing of Adelaide being the serial killer capital of the world, and I don't know enough to know whether that's true or not, but it's certainly a lot. Yeah, correct. I think, too, the things like the psychic, the hoax letters. I mean, imagine the parents who went to this thing to meet him to get the...
I just said it as a joke, all right? No, fuck, not all right.
It took them 26 years to get clearance from that. For 26 years, they would have been going, what if we hadn't have taken the detective? Yeah. What if?
We could have got the kids back.
And there's what if, but the torture that they would have endured for 26 years just over that one incident, it's so cruel.
So how would you sentence the child, the idiot teenager who eventually says, that was me, I did it as a joke. How would you sentence him for that behaviour? 26 years of weekend prison.
I mean,
Yeah. Can't go out with your friends. Got to go to jail.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe no fingers, so he can't write letters anymore.
And weekend
Hopes
jail.
or otherwise. And weekend jail, yes. Yeah, what an ass.
There's
I
just
hope
no
he's
trace of these kids at all.
at
Nothing.
all.
No,
Nothing
not a
at all.
single piece of evidence.
But they're going to
It's
dig
just-
deeper this week.
That's just bizarre.
It's not really. I mean, there's 3 small kids. There's no CCTV at the time. There's no DNA. It's on a beach. I mean, it's pretty hard to maintain a scene when the tide comes in, etc. All we've heard is that witness testimony, which is not really necessarily the strongest thing
Reliable.
anyway. Yeah, wandering around with a man with blonde hair. Everything else is just supposition, which is linking people who may or may not have done other things. Even the witness testimony, the son of, what did you say his name was, Harry Phipps, didn't come out until when? After he died or something?
2013
Yeah,
or something.
2007 maybe, I
What,
think it
35,
was.
40 years later? Oh, yeah, I saw this.
But-
it's like, mate, come on. I'm not saying he didn't
it's-
see it, but I'm saying if you don't call it at the time, it's very hard to then find those kids.
Oh, yeah. I think the other thing, though, that, from the parents' perspective, it's all of their kids. There's
I know.
none left. Like,
The whole family.
I don't know. Imagine that house post that event.
I can't. It's awful.
The quietness, the echoes, just everything. You couldn't. I don't know how you come back from that sort of devastation.
It's so creepy.
It
It's
is,
so,
like-
and it really is. It's like when you were talking about it before, I think it's where we've heard about it. If we weren't aware of the story, we probably would have been at different points in our life and you sort of aren't paying so much attention, but I bet our parents did. It's that the loss of innocence, because that crime, without any evidence or anything to go with, is terrifying because they're not, they vanished. 1 minute they're there enjoying their childhood and then they vanished. And then there's these little comments about, that Jane had said, that Arnna had said that Jane had a boyfriend, things like that. Oh, they're really freaky.
I think often not knowing is worse than knowing.
Oh, yeah.
You don't get closure. There's just no closure.
Often, I mean, I'm sure there's some that are just horrific and you wish you didn't know, but yeah,
But
you would
even
always
just
think
being
the
able
worst.
to find the remains and go to some place where you can have the ritual of a burial or whatever, like just nothing.
Yeah.
There's nothing. Just they've gone.
It was a
just
very.
disappeared.
Do you remember being, growing up in Australia? My recollection of pedophilia as such was the language around it. It was a lot of it was a joke. He's a kiddie fiddler, Chester, child molester. Like it was all this kind of, they're there, but like, oh, what sickos? But it wasn't. It was always about jokes, and you call everybody that. Oh, you're this. You're a.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you talk about this, about what the sister had said about her older sister having a boyfriend. And I've probably even said this on the podcast before. When I was in primary school, I was such a goody-goody, it was ridiculous. And I got in trouble twice in the whole time I was in primary school. And it terrified me and stuck with me. And one of those times, we had, I don't know if he was a gardener so much as someone.
Gardener, I remember you saying
I've
that.
told the guy,
You
yeah.
jobbed in and got him in trouble.
Yeah, and I got in trouble because we were all running and we were told we weren't allowed near him. We were told in assembly that we were not to go near him. Why would you have him working on school grounds?
He did excellent work with the geranium.
He was a young guy, like he was probably in his 20s, might even be younger, I don't know. And I was running around playing with the girls and I said, loves you. And the other kids said, such and such, Carla's done this. And I had to go to the headmaster. I was in so much trouble for saying that. And I look at it now and I think, how back to front is that all the kids were warned repeatedly? And I got in trouble because I did the wrong thing. I get it. But what were they concerned of? Yeah, precisely. And it comes with this sort of language and, it was sort of like, oh, they were perverts and weirdos and whatever
maybe your
else.
gardener
But this
wasn't
is
a pervert, though.
Well, I don't know what he was. Could have been anything. He might have come out of prison. I don't know. It might have been that. It could have been anything.
Been recently from prison,
been.
like not necessarily a sexual pervert, but you just stay away from him. He's been in jail, and we don't want your parents complaining that we're letting you talk to him, kind of thing.
So maybe don't have him at a school. I don't know, but it just really stuck with me, and I just think this was well and truly a decade after that. It would have been probably 1980 or something that I'm talking about. But gosh, it's so different the way the news cycle works. how the information that's being shared with us, how they're looking for cameras. People are so aware. That would have been so different. It's just that you had, I guess, a smaller population. People probably knew more about one another.
You just don't expect
I saw them, said hi.
Yeah.
As you said, the children are recognised in the local shops. There are lots of things that could help potentially. But then when you're trying to paint a bigger picture, it's much easier now for them to look at CCTV, GPS, cars going through traffic lights, things that, where you can, everything sort of, you can build information story, whereas here, like, you're screwed. It must be so hard to really find things when there's nothing. Where there's nothing now, we can build the picture. When there's nothing there, there's nowhere to go and build the picture from, except from people's testimony, which is always the loosest thread in the whole thing.
And then you've got shady pedos saying they did it, and you're having to disprove that. Like, what?
So, sentencing?
I think from what all accounts, I feel like the police all did a very good job. I don't think there's anything that you kind of go, that wasn't great. So there's no defective detecting or anything that that I feel like there's a need to point out.
Imagine the pressure on them back in the day that they would have even put on themselves, that one family, 3 small children, kids. Gone. I would assume that every stone was turned. You know what I mean? I don't think that it's the kind of crime that would have been not taken unbelievably seriously for, there would have been a lot of people who would have been trying to do their absolute best to try and bring something about
Yeah.
I really do think that.
I think the psychic needs some kind of a punishment for
wasting everyone's time.
Pointing out that house. Like, and imagine the period where there was $40,000 raised.
Such a lot of money.
Back then, it's a huge amount. And they're going, no, I don't want you to demolish our place. I want you to do, there's nothing to see here. And then the mounting pressure on them.
Yeah.
Like, what, mate? Fuck off. Go back home.
And they probably did, right?
He would have, and probably did the same thing again.
Something else. Exactly. I'm sure, like, without
charge people money.
It's not like he's the one who's going to get charged. You believed it. Oh, there's no shocking.
Who do you think did it?
I honestly have no idea. I don't think you can credibly point the finger at anyone. I mean, I think Pipsy's the only one that they're kind of still looking at. Failing that, I don't think they've got anywhere to go. I guess the next 3 days, weirdly, nearly 60 years later, 59 years later, is the last kind of.
And aren't they all dead anyway? Not Spencer Von Einem, but aren't most of the people who were named in your honour roll dead?
Yeah, correct. So the parents are gone, the children are gone, the victims essentially are gone, and most of the suspects are gone.
Well, I got a position that says, obviously, the children are, I think we're all quite erring on the side that the children were taken and killed at some point, so they're not living somewhere else, under different names. Assuming that, then being someone of some faith, I'd like to think that the parents are reunited. And I'd like to think that the person who did this, probably one of those people who have now passed, is burning in hell with their fingers being, what did you say, with their fingers being burned or removed and just being provided with eternity of retribution for their disgusting actions on earth.
Suitably abused every day. More than just weekend prison.
Yeah, definitely more than just weekend prison.
I think that's about as good as you can get. It's got to be a kind of a generic one, doesn't it?
Beautiful little kids too. I mean, come on.
Oh.
Maybe we can revisit in a couple of weeks when we find out if they've had any luck.
Yeah, we'll see.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah.
I'm not holding my breath,
even
but it would
just
be nice.
Know where the kids are, now.
Yeah.
I mean, that's that closure piece, isn't it? To just go, God.
Yeah. And on that note, as we say every week, miss you already.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Happy 180th.
I know,
episode.
Right? Ooh. Thanks for listening to Trial by Wine. You can contact us at trialbywine@gmail.com. Please rate, review and subscribe to Trial by Wine on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support us, you can become a patron at www.patreon.com, Trial by Wine, or visit our website www.trialbywine.com to donate to us. Your support will help us cover many more cases and apply wacky sentences. We really appreciate you listening and hope you tell everyone about us. Our cover art is by John Christo and music is by Beauchamp from Pixabay.com.